In 1975, archaeologists digging in a cave in Moravia uncovered something that stopped them cold. Two infants, buried together, side by side, their bodies arranged with care, red ochre powder dusted across their bones, grave goods placed between them. Someone had taken time. Someone had thought about this. They were twins, and they had died on the same day, approximately 30,000 years ago. Nobody knows why, but that question, why did they die together, opens a door into one of the darkest and most complicated corners of human history. Because for most of the time humans have existed on this planet, twins were not greeted with joy. They were greeted with fear. And what happened next depended entirely on where you were born, who your mother was, and what your tribe believed about the nature of the world. Let's start with the biology. In modern times, twins are common enough that most people know at least one pair. But for most of human history, a twin birth was something most people in a community might see only once or twice in a lifetime. It was rare, it was unexpected, and in a world without hospitals, without emergency medicine, without any understanding of genetics, it was almost always dangerous. Twin pregnancies are harder on the mother. They are more likely to end in premature birth. The infants are smaller, weaker, less likely to survive the first weeks of life without intervention. In a hunter-gatherer group, moving constantly across a landscape, carrying two infants instead of one, was not a logistical inconvenience. It was a survival problem. A nursing mother in a mobile group could realistically feed and carry one infant. Two infants meant twice the energy, twice the vulnerability, twice the noise at the wrong moment. In environments where noise could attract predators, where food was never guaranteed, where the group's survival depended on mobility, two infants born at once created a crisis that had to be resolved. And the resolution in many ancient cultures was not what modern people want to hear. Infanticide was not a rare aberration in the ancient world. It was a documented, widespread practice across cultures on every continent. Archaeological evidence, anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, and historical records from early civilizations all point to the same conclusion. When resources were scarce, when survival was uncertain, when a child was born into circumstances that made its survival unlikely, decisions were made, and twins, almost everywhere, were considered a special category. In some cultures, twins were feared because they seemed impossible. One father, two children. The math didn't make sense to a worldview without genetics, which meant one of the children had a different father, which meant the mother had been with someone else, which meant shame, suspicion, and in some communities, serious danger for the mother and both children. In other cultures, twins were feared because they seemed supernatural. Two identical faces, two bodies from one, a duplication that nature had no obvious reason to produce. In a world where unusual events were interpreted as omens, as messages from forces beyond human understanding, twins arriving in a community could be read as a warning. A warning of what? That depended on the culture. Among some groups in sub-Saharan Africa, twins were seen as a sign of chaos about to arrive. Their birth meant something had gone wrong in the relationship between the living and the dead. To prevent the coming disaster, one or both twins had to be removed. Among certain groups in ancient India, twins of different sexes were considered to have committed an offense against nature simply by existing in the same womb. The solution varied, but separation, exile, or worse were documented outcomes. In parts of ancient China, twins were considered to bring misfortune to the household. The second twin, the one who arrived last, was sometimes considered the dangerous one, the intruder. But here is where the history becomes genuinely strange, because running directly alongside these traditions of fear in many of the same regions, sometimes in the same cultures at different periods, was an equally powerful tradition of reverence. Twins who survived were sometimes considered sacred. The Yoruba people of West Africa have one of the highest natural twin birth rates in the world and one of the most elaborate cultural systems for honoring them. The Ibeji, the sacred twins, were considered to carry special spiritual power. If a twin died, a carved wooden figure was made to house their spirit. The surviving twin carried the figure everywhere, fed it symbolically, dressed it. The death of a twin was not an ending. It was a transformation into something that still needed care. The Romans had Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of the greatest empire the ancient world produced, nursed by a wolf, destined to build something no single man could have built alone. The myth carried a message. Twins contain something doubled, something more than ordinary humans. The Greeks had Castor and Pollux, one mortal, one divine, who between them represented the fullness of what humanity could be. They became the constellation Gemini. Even in death, they were not separated. The ancient Egyptians recorded twin births with particular attention. Some pharaonic families appeared to produce twins at higher rates than the general population, possibly because certain hereditary lines carried the trait, but interpreted at the time as divine favor. So which was it? Were twins a curse or a blessing? The answer is that they were both, at the same time, in the same human mind. Because the thing that made twins frightening was the same thing that made them powerful. They were anomalies. They broke the ordinary pattern of birth. They arrived as a pair when the world expected a single individual, and anything that broke the pattern was simultaneously threatening and sacred. The same logic that made ancient peoples fear solar eclipses also made them worship the sun. The same logic that made a deformed animal into an omen also made it into an offering. Anything that deviated from the expected pattern was charged with meaning, and meaning in the ancient world was never neutral. It always pointed somewhere. The Moravia twins, from 30,000 years ago, the ones found with red ochre and grave goods, were buried with more care than most adults of their era received. Someone had decided they mattered. Someone had decided their death required ceremony. Whether they died of natural causes or something else, nobody can say. But someone buried them like they were important. And that detail, that small, careful act of arrangement, of ochre, of objects placed between two small bodies in a cave, contains something that resists simple explanation. It suggests that even 30,000 years ago, before agriculture, before cities, before any of the cultural frameworks we use to organize meaning, humans already understood that twins were not ordinary, that their arrival demanded a response beyond the practical, that they meant something. The practices changed across cultures and centuries. The fear gave way in some places, hardened in others, transformed into reverence somewhere else. Some twins were killed at birth. Some were raised as royalty. Some were given to temples. Some were separated at the moment of birth and never allowed to meet again. But in every culture that left a record carved in stone, written on papyrus, buried in grave sites, documented by anthropologists, twins were never just two babies. They were always a question the community had to answer together because it was too large for any single person to hold. What does it mean when nature makes two where there should be one? 30,000 years later, we still don't have a simple answer. We just stopped being afraid of the question.